Close your eyes and journey back through time. Not hundreds of years, but thousands. Not to the Clone Wars or the rise of the Empire, but to an age when the galaxy was young and the Republic was still finding its shape among the stars. 25,000 years before the Battle of Yavin, before Luke Skywalker ever ignited his father's lightsaber, before the Death Star cast its shadow across the galaxy, something remarkable happened. Scattered human colonies across the core worlds discovered the secret of hyperspace travel. Some historians believe humans invented the hyperdrive themselves, brilliant minds working in isolation on worlds like Coruscant, Corellia, and Alderaan. Others suggest alien traders from the unknown regions introduced this revolutionary technology, sharing knowledge that would reshape galactic civilization forever. The truth remains lost to time, buried beneath 25 millennia of history. What we know with certainty is this: hyperspace travel changed everything. Before the hyperdrive, star systems existed in isolation, each world developing its own culture, technology, and society without ever knowing that countless others struggled with the same questions under different suns. The invention of faster-than-light travel shattered that cosmic loneliness. Picture the first hyperspace explorers, brave souls who climbed into primitive starships and activated drives based on theories they barely understood. They plotted courses using mathematics that predicted the existence of hyperspace lanes, those invisible rivers flowing between gravity wells. When they pulled the lever and reality twisted around them, when their ships slipped into that alternate dimension where distance meant nothing, they couldn't have known they were creating a future that would span 1,000,000 worlds. The early hyperspace routes were crude, dangerous paths mapped through trial and error. Ships vanished into the void, their crews never to be heard from again. But slowly, carefully, the pioneers established safe lanes between the most important core worlds, Coruscant to Corellia, Alderaan to Chandrila. These first hyperspace routes became the arteries through which galactic civilization would flow. Trade followed the explorers. Merchants discovered they could transport goods between star systems, exchanging resources, technology, and ideas across distances that once seemed impossible to cross. A farmer on Alderaan could sell grain to feed the factory workers of Corellia. A Coruscanti engineer could install advanced systems on a Chandralan colony ship. Economic networks formed, binding distant worlds together through mutual benefit and shared prosperity. But commerce alone doesn't build civilizations. The worlds of the core needed something more, something to unite them beyond simple trade agreements. They needed a government that could mediate disputes, establish common laws, and protect the growing network of hyperspace routes from pirates and raiders. Around 25,000 years before the Battle of Yavin, representatives from worlds across the core gathered on Coruscant. This ecumenopolis, this planet-wide city, had already established itself as the symbolic heart of human space. Its position at the intersection of major hyperspace routes made it the natural choice for a capital. In meeting halls that would be rebuilt and renovated countless times over the coming millennia, these early senators drafted the Galactic Constitution. This document established the Galactic Republic, a democratic union of sovereign star systems that agreed to follow common laws while maintaining their own independence. Each member world would send representatives to the Galactic Senate, where they would debate policy, resolve conflicts, and guide the Republic's future through democratic vote. The early Republic was nothing like the bloated bureaucracy it would become 24,000 years later. In those first centuries, the government remained small, focused on essential tasks, maintaining the hyperspace routes, mediating disputes between member worlds, and coordinating defense against external threats. The Senate met perhaps once a year, and sessions rarely lasted more than a few weeks. Into this young republic came beings who had studied the Force for generations. The Jedi Order traced its origins back millennia before the Republic's founding, to ancient Force sensitives who had gathered on the planet Ossus to share their knowledge and understanding of the mysterious energy field that connected all living things. The Jedi had developed a philosophy centered on peace, knowledge, and service to others. They rejected emotional attachment, believing that passion clouded judgment and led to rash decisions. They taught that a Jedi's power came not from domination but from understanding, from becoming one with the Force and allowing it to guide their actions. When the Republic formed, the Jedi saw an opportunity to serve a cause greater than themselves. The Council on Ossus voted to ally the Order with this new government, offering their unique abilities to help maintain peace and justice across the expanding network of Republic worlds. The partnership proved invaluable. Jedi could sense deception through the Force, making them ideal mediators in complex disputes. Their combat abilities allowed them to handle threats that local security forces couldn't manage. Their philosophical commitment to peace meant they used violence only as a last resort, preferring negotiation and understanding whenever possible. As the centuries passed, the relationship between the Jedi and Republic deepened. The Order established temples on major worlds, training new generations of Force sensitives in the Jedi way. Masters traveled the hyperspace routes, responding to calls for help from troubled systems. The sight of a Jedi's lightsaber became a symbol of hope, a promise that justice and wisdom would prevail over chaos and darkness. This golden age of cooperation wasn't without its complications. The Jedi Council sometimes took extraordinary measures during crises, even shutting down the Senate on occasion when they believed immediate action was necessary. This set a dangerous precedent, establishing that the Order could override democratic processes if they deemed it necessary for the greater good. The early Republic expanded steadily outward from the core. Explorers mapped new hyperspace routes into the region that would become known as the colonies, then further out into the inner rim. Each new route opened access to dozens, sometimes hundreds, of star systems. Some were already inhabited by alien species with their own civilizations. Others hosted human colonies that had been isolated for millennia, evolving their own unique cultures. The Republic welcomed these new members, though not always smoothly. Cultural differences created friction. Economic disputes erupted as worlds competed for resources and trade advantages. The Senate grew larger and more unwieldy as thousands of systems claimed representation. One particularly turbulent period became known as the Alsakan conflicts, a series of disputes between Coruscant and the rival world of Alsakan over which should serve as the Republic's capital. These conflicts would flare up repeatedly over thousands of years, sometimes escalating to brief military engagements. Though historians in later eras would reference these troubles, the specific details faded from reliable record. The Great Manifest period saw the Republic's most aggressive expansion, as explorers pushed deep into the mid-rim and even touched the edges of the outer rim.
Governments on frontier worlds often struggled to maintain order, and the Senate's authority grew thin across such vast distances.
Corruption began to seep into the system as senators from wealthy core worlds used their influence to secure favorable trade agreements and resource rights. Yet through all these growing pains, the Republic endured. It adapted, evolved, and spread across the galaxy like a slow tide, bringing with it the promise of democracy, the rule of law, and the protection of the Jedi Order. For thousands of years, this partnership between elected government and force-wielding peacekeepers maintained a level of stability and prosperity unprecedented in galactic history. But not everyone agreed with the Jedi's philosophy. not everyone believed that peace and serenity represented the true path to understanding the Force. Around 7,000 years before the Battle of Yavin, trouble stirred within the Jedi Order itself. A faction of Jedi Knights grew frustrated with what they saw as the Council's timid approach to the Force. These rebels argued that the Council's restrictions were holding them back, preventing them from achieving their full potential. The dissidents believed that passion, not serenity, was the key to power. They taught that emotions like anger, fear, and ambition weren't weaknesses to be suppressed, but tools to be harnessed. They conducted experiments the Council had forbidden, delving into aspects of the Force that the traditional Jedi considered dangerous or taboo. Chief among these forbidden practices was Sith alchemy, an ancient art that used the Force to alter living tissue, creating mutations and monstrosities. The Dark Jedi experimented on themselves and on captured creatures, twisting life itself to serve their purposes. They developed techniques for draining Force energy from others, for inflicting pain through Force lightning, for crushing minds with telekinetic pressure.
The Jedi Council watched these developments with growing alarm.
They tried reason, attempted to guide the wayward Jedi back to the light, but the dissidents had tasted power, and they refused to surrender what they had discovered. The philosophical disagreement hardened into ideological warfare. What historians call the Second Great Schism tore the Jedi Order apart. The Dark Jedi declared their independence from the Council's authority, gathering followers and establishing their own training centers. They rejected the Jedi Code entirely, embracing instead a philosophy centered on individual power and strength. Among the leaders of this rebellion stood figures whose names would echo through Sith history for millennia. Ajunta Pal, a warrior of exceptional strength and tactical brilliance, became one of the movement's most charismatic leaders. Karnez Moore developed techniques of Sith alchemy that would influence dark side practitioners for thousands of years. Sozin delved deep into forbidden knowledge, compiling texts that future Sith Lords would treasure. The conflict between the Jedi loyalists and the Dark Jedi rebels escalated from arguments to duels to full-scale warfare. What began as a philosophical disagreement transformed into the 100-year darkness, a century of bloodshed that nearly destroyed the Jedi Order.
The Dark Jedi unleashed horrors upon Republic worlds.
Using Sith alchemy, they created monstrous beasts, twisted abominations that served as living weapons.
These creatures terrorized civilian populations, forcing the Republic military to respond. What had begun as an internal Jedi matter became a threat to the entire Republic. The Jedi Council mobilized the full strength of the Order. Thousands of Jedi Masters, Knights, and even senior Padawans joined the fight against the Dark Jedi and their creations. Battles raged across dozens of star systems. Ancient temples were destroyed. Entire worlds were scarred by the conflict. The Dark Jedi proved formidable opponents. Their willingness to use emotions like anger and hatred gave them a savage edge in combat. Their alchemical creations required entire armies to contain. For decades, the outcome remained uncertain. The Jedi had numbers and popular support, but the Dark Jedi had raw power and ruthless determination. The final confrontation came at the Battle of Korbos, around 6,900 years before the Battle of Yavin.
There, the massed forces of the Jedi Order finally overwhelmed the Dark Jedi.
The alchemical monstrosities were destroyed or captured. The Dark Jedi themselves were defeated, their leaders slain or taken prisoner. The victorious Jedi faced a crucial decision. What should be done with the surviving Dark Jedi? Many voices called for execution, arguing that these fallen Jedi had proven themselves too dangerous to be allowed to live. They had rejected redemption, embraced darkness willingly, and unleashed terrible suffering across the galaxy. But the Jedi Council chose what they believed was a more compassionate path. They would not kill the defeated Dark Jedi. Instead, they would exile them, casting them out of Republic space to wander the unknown regions, perhaps in isolation. Far from the corrupting influences that had led them astray, these fallen Jedi might find their way back to the light. The Dark Jedi were stripped of their weapons and most of their possessions. They were loaded onto unarmed transport ships and escorted to the edge of known space. There, the Republic escort turned back, leaving the exiles to make their own way into the darkness beyond charted stars. This act of mercy would reshape galactic history in ways the Jedi Council could never have imagined. For the Dark Jedi did not find redemption in exile. They found something far more dangerous. The exile ships wandered for weeks, making random hyperspace jumps to avoid pursuit, searching desperately for a habitable world where they could rebuild. Ship after ship exhausted its fuel, drifting dead in the void. Crews mutinied, killed each other, or simply gave up and chose death over endless wandering. But one group of ships, carrying the most powerful of the Dark Jedi leaders, discovered a world that would change everything. They dropped out of hyperspace near a red star and found themselves looking at a desert planet, harsh and forbidding, but unmistakably Korriban, the Sith homeworld. The native Sith species were humanoid but distinctly alien. Their skin ranged from deep red to near black, often marked with distinctive facial ridges and tendrils. They had built a civilization centered around conquest and strength, ruled by a caste of sorcerer kings who wielded what they called magic, but what the Dark Jedi immediately recognized as crude force abilities. The Sith people had a natural connection to the dark side, generations of living on Korriban. A world unusually strong in dark side energy had shaped their evolution. They used this power instinctively, channeling it through rituals and ceremonies they barely understood. When the Dark Jedi ships descended from the sky, the Sith people saw gods. These pale-skinned beings commanded powers beyond anything the Sith had witnessed. They could move objects with their minds, shoot lightning from their fingertips, and leap across impossible distances. They knew techniques of force manipulation that made the Sith's crude magic look like children's tricks. The Dark Jedi seized this opportunity. They presented themselves as divine beings, come to lead the Sith to greatness. The native Sith, awed and overwhelmed, worshipped these newcomers. The strongest Dark Jedi claimed positions as lords and kings, ruling over cities and territories. Ajunta Pal, the greatest warrior among the exiles, declared himself the first Dark Lord of the Sith. He established a hierarchy with himself at the apex, his fellow Dark Jedi serving as Sith Lords beneath him, and the native Sith as subjects and servants. He created the foundations of what would become Sith philosophy, teachings that would influence dark-side practitioners for thousands of years to come. The Dark Jedi adopted the name of the species they now ruled. They were no longer fallen Jedi or Dark Jedi rebels. They were Sith Lords, masters of the dark side, heirs to an ancient tradition of power through passion. Over the following centuries, the human Dark Jedi and the native Sith species began to interbreed. The children of these unions possessed both the force sensitivity of their human ancestors and the natural dark side affinity of their Sith heritage. These hybrid bloodlines would dominate Sith society for generations. The Sith Lords established their capital on Korriban, in the Valley of the Dark Lords. There they built massive temples and tombs, monuments to their power carved into the desert rock. When a Sith Lord died, they were entombed in elaborate mausoleums filled with treasures, guarded by traps and dark side energy, ensuring their legacy would endure beyond death.
But the Sith were never content to rule only Korriban.
They expanded to nearby worlds, establishing settlements on planets like Zeost, which became a secondary capital. They sent expeditions deeper into the unknown regions, claiming territory and subjugating primitive species they encountered. The early Sith Empire grew in isolation from the Republic. Thousands of light years separated them from their former enemies. The hyperspace routes that connected Sith space to the Republic remained undiscovered, keeping the two civilizations separated by an apparently unbridgeable gulf.
The Sith developed a society built on principles antithetical to the Jedi.
Where the Jedi preached peace, the Sith glorified conflict. Where the Jedi taught emotional restraint, the Sith encouraged passionate expression. Where the Jedi sought harmony with the Force, the Sith demanded dominance over it. Competition was central to Sith philosophy. The weak deserved to fall, while the strong deserved to rise. Ambition was not merely accepted, but celebrated.
A Sith apprentice who grew stronger than their master had every right to challenge them for power.
This constant internal struggle, the Sith believed, ensured that only the most powerful and cunning would lead their civilization. The Dark Lord of the Sith ruled as an absolute tyrant, commanding the loyalty of Sith Lords who themselves governed territories and commanded armies. These lords competed with each other constantly, engaging in political maneuvering, assassination, and occasional open warfare. The Dark Lord maintained control through superior power and political skill, playing rivals against each other to prevent any single faction from growing strong enough to challenge their rule. Slavery was widespread in the Sith Empire. Conquered populations were forced to labor in mines, construct monuments, and serve in Sith households. The Sith saw no moral issue with slavery. It was simply the natural order of things. The strong commanded, the weak obeyed. Sith alchemy reached new heights under the tutelage of masters who had all the time and resources they needed to perfect their craft. They created new species of monsters, twisted life forms bred to serve as guards, soldiers, or simply displays of power. They developed techniques to extend their own lives, preserve their spirits beyond death, and inflict suffering in ways the Jedi had never imagined. For roughly 1,000 years, the Sith Empire grew in strength and territory, completely unknown to the Republic they had once been exiled from. They built fleets, trained armies, and amassed power. And then, around 5,100 years before the Battle of Yavin, a remarkable Sith Lord rose to become Dark Lord. His name was Marka Ragnos, and his reign would define the golden age of the Sith. Ragnos was a hybrid, carrying both human and Sith blood in his veins. His dark red skin and distinctive facial features marked his Sith heritage, while his tactical brilliance and Force abilities showcased the legacy of the Dark Jedi who had founded the Empire. He was a warrior without equal, capable of defeating multiple opponents simultaneously with a combination of lightsaber skill and devastating Force powers. But what truly set Ragnos apart was his political genius. Unlike many Dark Lords who held their position through brute force alone, Ragnos understood the importance of manipulation, misdirection, and strategic thinking. He didn't merely defeat his rivals, he turned them against each other, ensuring they spent their energy fighting among themselves instead of challenging him. When ambitious Sith Lords plotted against him, Ragnos would discover their plans through his network of spies and informants. Then, rather than crushing them immediately, he would feed them false information, making them believe they had allies who were actually loyal to Ragnos. When the conspirators made their move, they would find themselves isolated, betrayed by those they had trusted, facing the full wrath of the Dark Lord's loyal forces. Ragnos rewarded those who served him well, granting them territories and privileges that made them wealthy and powerful. But he always ensured no single Sith Lord grew strong enough to threaten him. If one Lord became too successful, too influential, Ragnos would suddenly turn other lords against them, engineering conflicts that reduced the threat without Ragnos having to take direct action.
This delicate balancing act required constant attention and supreme skill.
Ragnos had to monitor dozens of competing factions, track shifting alliances, and respond to threats both obvious and subtle. Yet he made it look effortless, maintaining his position as Dark Lord for over a century, an almost unheard of achievement in Sith history. Under Ragnos' leadership, the Sith Empire reached its zenith. They expanded their borders to encompass dozens of star systems. They built magnificent temples and palaces that demonstrated the heights of Sith architecture. They developed new force techniques and refined old ones. Their military strength grew to a point where they could have challenged the Republic itself had they known where to find their ancient enemy. The native Sith species continued to interbreed with the human bloodlines until pure-blooded Sith became increasingly rare. But their genetic legacy persisted in the hybrid population that dominated the Empire's ruling class. Red skin and distinctive facial features remained common, marking individuals as descended from the planet's original inhabitants. Sith culture flourished. They developed art that celebrated power and conquest. Their literature told stories of ambition, betrayal, and triumph. Their music incorporated dark side energy, creating pieces that could induce fear or aggression in those who listened. Everything in Sith society reflected their core philosophy: power through passion, strength through conflict, victory through domination.
Marka Ragnos maintained this golden age for over 100 years.
His reign became legendary, a time when the Empire was strong, prosperous, and secure. Future Sith Lords would look back on the Age of Ragnos as proof that one individual, through sufficient power and cunning, could achieve greatness that lasted beyond their lifetime. But all things end, even the lives of the most powerful Sith Lords. Around 5,000 years before the Battle of Yavin, Marka Ragnos' long reign finally came to a close. The great Dark Lord died, his body failing despite all his mastery of the Force and knowledge of Sith alchemy. His death created a power vacuum that threatened to tear the Empire apart. Two powerful Sith Lords immediately emerged as the primary contenders for Ragnos' throne.
Each represented a different vision for the Empire's future.
Each commanded significant military forces and political support. Each believed themselves worthy to wear the mantle of Dark Lord. The first contender was Naga Sato, an ambitious and forward-thinking Sith Lord who believed the Empire had grown stagnant in its isolation. Sato argued that the Sith should expand aggressively, conquering new territories and spreading their influence across the galaxy. He spoke of rediscovering the hyperspace routes to the Republic, of crushing the Jedi and subjugating the Republic worlds that their ancestors had once been exiled from. Sato was a master of Sith sorcery, particularly skilled in the art of battle meditation and creating Force illusions. He could project images of ships and soldiers that seemed entirely real, multiplying the apparent size of his forces. He commanded a loyal following among younger, more ambitious Sith Lords who chafed at the Empire's isolation and yearned for greater conquests. The second contender was Ludo Kresh, a conservative traditionalist who believed the Empire should consolidate the territory it already controlled rather than risk overextending itself into unknown dangers.
Kresh argued that Sato's aggressive expansion would expose the Empire to threats they didn't understand, potentially leading to disaster.
Kresh was a military genius, renowned for his tactical skill and strategic thinking.
He had spent decades commanding Sith fleets and armies, earning the respect of the Empire's military establishment. His followers included many of the Empire's most powerful and established Sith Lords, those who benefited from the current system and feared the chaos that might result from Sato's radical changes. The funeral of Marka Ragnos became the stage where this rivalry erupted into open conflict. The Empire's most powerful Sith Lords gathered on Korriban to entomb their fallen leader in a massive mausoleum in the Valley of the Dark Lords. It was meant to be a solemn occasion, a final tribute to the greatest Dark Lord in Sith history. Naga Sato arrived with his supporters, a show of military strength designed to intimidate his rivals. Ludo Kresh came with his own forces, equally determined to demonstrate his power. The two groups faced each other across Ragnos's open tomb, tension crackling between them like lightning. Words were exchanged, insults flew, accusations of unworthiness and incompetence echoed through the valley. And then Sato and Kresh drew their lightsabers, the ancient weapons igniting with characteristic hisses. Red blades met in a clash that sent force energy rippling through the assembled mourners.
The duel was fierce and brutal.
Sato's sorcery created illusions that confused and distracted Kresh, making it difficult to distinguish real attacks from phantoms. Kresh's superior combat skill allowed him to press through Sato's tricks, landing strikes that would have killed a lesser opponent. Both warriors channeled the dark side, enhancing their speed and strength beyond normal limits. The assembled Sith Lords watched in awe and horror as their two greatest leaders battled for supremacy. Some began choosing sides, readying weapons in case the duel escalated into a wider conflict. The Empire teetered on the edge of civil war, and then something impossible happened. The air above Ragnos's tomb shimmered and twisted. A shape began to form, transparent and ghostly but unmistakable. The spirit of Marka Ragnos himself appeared before the assembled Sith Lords, his spectral form towering over the combatants. The fighting stopped. Sato and Kresh lowered their lightsabers, staring in shock at the manifestation of their dead emperor. Every Sith present felt the power radiating from Ragnos's spirit, a reminder that even death had not ended his connection to the dark side.
The ghost spoke, its voice echoing strangely, as if coming from a great distance.
Ragnos warned the two combatants that their actions threatened everything the Sith had built over 1,000 years. He spoke of both danger and opportunity, of a future that held great potential but also terrible risks. The Sith had grown strong in isolation, but they could not remain hidden forever. Change was coming, whether they willed it or not. Then, as suddenly as it had appeared, the spirit vanished. The assembled Sith Lords stood in stunned silence, processing what they had witnessed. Sato and Kresh deactivated their lightsabers, the immediate crisis apparently averted by their former leader's ghostly intervention. But the succession crisis was far from resolved. Ragnos's spirit had not chosen between them, had not declared a clear successor. The question of who would lead the Sith Empire remained unanswered, a wound that could not heal until one candidate or the other claimed undisputed power. The duel had ended without a victor, but the conflict between Naga Sato and Ludo Kresh would continue. The Empire stood at a crossroads, as Ragnos's spirit had warned. The golden age of peace and prosperity under Ragnos's rule was ending. The Sith Empire's long isolation was about to come to a dramatic and violent conclusion, triggered by an accident of navigation that neither the Sith nor the Republic could have predicted. In the year 5000 before the Battle of Yavin, two young explorers named Gav and Jory Daragon made a mistake that would reshape galactic history. They were hyperspace scouts, siblings who made their living mapping new routes between star systems. On this particular journey, they were searching for a shortcut that would reduce travel time between two Republic worlds. Something went wrong with their navigational calculations. Perhaps they entered the wrong coordinates. Perhaps their aging ship's computer malfunctioned. Perhaps the Force itself intervened, guiding them toward a destiny they never sought. Whatever the cause, the Daragon ship, the Starbreaker 12, dropped out of hyperspace far from any known Republic system. They found themselves in orbit around a desert world that appeared on no star charts. Strange ships moved between this planet and its nearby moon, designs unlike anything they had seen before. Unsure what else to do, the Daragons descended toward the planet's surface, hoping to make contact with the inhabitants and gain directions back to Republic space. What they couldn't know was that they had just stumbled into Sith Empire space, the first Republic citizens to make contact with the descendants of the Dark Jedi in 1,000 years. The Sith forces on Korriban detected the unfamiliar ship immediately. Warships surrounded the Starbreaker 12, forcing the Daragons to land at the primary spaceport. Sith warriors swarmed their vessel, dragging Gav and Jory into custody as potential spies or invaders.
The siblings were brought before the Sith Lords, still locked in their power struggle after Marka Ragno's death.
To most of the assembled Sith, these strangers represented a threat to be eliminated. They spoke basic, the common language of the Republic, confirming that they came from the ancient enemy the Dark Jedi had fled a millennium ago. But Naga Sado saw something different. He saw opportunity. While Ludo Kresh argued for the immediate execution of the Daragons, Sado recognized that these explorers could serve his political purposes. If he could use them to demonstrate that the Republic threatened the Sith Empire, he could justify aggressive expansion and consolidate his claim to the throne. The discovery of Republic scouts in Sith space provided the perfect pretext for war. Sado orchestrated an elaborate deception. He secretly arranged for the Daragons to escape from their prison, making it appear as though Republic forces had mounted a rescue operation. Then he staged a false attack on Korriban, using his illusionary powers to create phantom ships that appeared to bombard Sith positions before vanishing. The plan worked brilliantly. Kresha and the other Sith Lords saw what appeared to be clear evidence of Republic aggression. Sado presented himself as the strong leader the Empire needed in this moment of crisis. He argued passionately that the Republic obviously knew about the Sith Empire and was preparing for war. The only logical response was to strike first, to take the fight to the enemy before they could marshal their full strength. Ludo Kresh saw through the manipulation, recognizing Sado's deception for what it was. He tried to warn the other Sith Lords, arguing that Sado was manufacturing a crisis to seize power. But he had waited too long to act. Sado had built too much support among the younger, more aggressive Sith Lords. Before Kresh could gather allies for a counterattack, Sado struck. His forces launched a surprise assault on Kresh's strongholds. Caught unprepared, Kresh's fleets were overwhelmed. His flagship was destroyed in a devastating barrage, apparently killing the conservative Sith Lord. With his primary rival eliminated, Naga Sado claimed the title of Dark Lord of the Sith. The Empire's military establishment, recognizing the reality of Sado's victory, pledged their loyalty to the new ruler. Those Sith Lords who had supported Kresh either submitted to Sado's authority or were quietly eliminated in the weeks that followed. Now in control of the Empire, Sado prepared for the war he had convinced everyone was necessary. He allowed Jory Daragon to escape back to Republic space, but not before placing a tracking device on her ship. When she jumped to hyperspace, fleeing back toward the familiar territory of the Republic, Sado's navigators carefully noted her trajectory. For the first time in 1,000 years, the Sith knew the hyperspace routes to Republic space. The barrier that had kept the two civilizations apart was broken. Sato assembled the greatest armada in Sith history. Every ship, every warrior, every dark side adept in the Empire was mobilized for the coming invasion. Massive vessels designed for planetary bombardment joined squadrons of swift fighters. Ground forces numbering in the hundreds of thousands prepared for planetary assaults. Sith sorcerers conducted rituals to empower the fleet with dark side energy. Sato knew the Sith were likely outnumbered by Republic forces. The Republic had expanded over 1,000 years while the Sith remained confined to a relatively small region of space. To compensate for this numerical disadvantage, Sato planned to use his greatest strength, his mastery of Sith battle meditation and illusion. From aboard a specialized meditation sphere, a ship designed to amplify his connection to the Force, Sato would project illusions that multiplied the apparent size of the Sith fleet. He would create phantom warships that looked, sounded, and fought like real vessels. Republic defenders would face what appeared to be an overwhelming force, when in reality many of the attacking ships were merely illusions. When the Sith Armada emerged from hyperspace in Republic territory, they struck with devastating speed and coordination. Dozens of worlds came under attack simultaneously. Coruscant, the Republic capital, faced a massive assault. The shipyards of Koros found themselves besieged by what appeared to be hundreds of Sith warships. Other key systems throughout the core and inner rim reported Sith attacks. The Republic had no warning, no preparation for this assault. Their defensive fleets were scattered across the galaxy, unprepared for coordinated attacks on so many worlds at once. The initial battles were disasters for Republic forces. Ships were destroyed, orbital stations were obliterated, and ground forces were overwhelmed by Sith warriors who fought with terrifying ferocity. The Jedi Order mobilized immediately, but they too were caught off guard. The Jedi had never faced an enemy quite like the Sith. These weren't mere dark Jedi rebels or corrupted Force users. These were trained warriors who had been studying the dark side for a millennium, refining their techniques across generations. They knew powers the Jedi had never encountered, employed tactics the Jedi were unprepared to counter. Initial reports from the front lines painted a grim picture. The Sith seemed unstoppable. Their numbers appeared overwhelming. Their warriors fought with a savage intensity that shattered Republic morale. World after world fell or sent desperate calls for reinforcement. Naga Sato, coordinating the assault from his meditation sphere, felt triumph swelling within him. The invasion was proceeding exactly as planned. The Republic forces were reeling, unable to mount an effective defense. Soon the ancient enemy would be crushed, and the Sith Empire would expand to encompass the entire galaxy. But war rarely follows a predictable path, and Sador's plan contained weaknesses he had not fully considered.
The Jedi Order, while initially caught off guard, proved remarkably adaptable.
Jedi Masters analyzed the Sith tactics, studied their Force techniques, and developed countermeasures. They discovered that many of the seemingly overwhelming Sith forces were illusions, and they learned to sense the difference between real ships and Force-generated phantoms. This knowledge spread quickly through Jedi communication networks. More significantly, Gav Daragon, the male explorer who had first brought the Republic and Sith into contact, became the instrument of Sador's downfall. After being captured by the Sith, Gav had been taken under Sador's wing. The Dark Lord saw potential in the young man and began training him in Sith techniques, hoping to gain a useful apprentice. But as Gav witnessed the brutality of the Sith assault on his home systems, his loyalty began to waver. He saw the suffering the invasion caused, the civilian casualties, the destruction of worlds he had once explored. The teachings of the dark side that Sato had shared couldn't overcome Gav's horror at what the Sith were doing to his people. In a moment that would change the course of the war, Gav Daragon made his choice. He infiltrated Sato's meditation sphere using knowledge he had gained as Sato's apprentice to bypass the guards and security measures. He reached the meditation chamber where the Dark Lord sat in deep concentration, maintaining the battle meditation that coordinated the Sith forces and sustained the illusory ships. Gav attacked. The assault broke Sato's concentration at a critical moment. Across dozens of battlefields, Sith forces suddenly found themselves without the coordinating influence of their leader's battle meditation. The illusions Sato had been maintaining flickered and vanished, revealing the true size of the Sith fleet. Republic commanders, monitoring the battles from their tactical centers, suddenly received reports that the enemy forces had been reduced by half or more. What had seemed like an unstoppable armada was revealed to be much smaller than it appeared. Ships that moments before had been firing devastating barrages simply ceased to exist, exposed as force-generated phantoms. The psychological impact was enormous. Republic forces, believing they faced overwhelming numbers, had been on the verge of despair. Now they saw the enemy was vulnerable, that the Sith could be defeated. Morale surged across all Republic battlefronts. The Jedi spread word of this revelation as quickly as they could. They explained how to distinguish real Sith ships from illusions, how to use the Force to pierce through Sato's deceptions. Republic fleets regrouped and counterattacked with renewed determination. Naga Sato, struggling to regain control of his meditation while fighting off Gav Daragon's assault, realized the tide had turned irreversibly against him. His greatest weapon, the ability to make his forces appear far larger than they were, had been neutralized. Without the psychological advantage of seemingly overwhelming numbers, his actual military forces were insufficient to conquer the Republic. He ordered a general retreat. The Sith Armada pulled back from Republic space, abandoning their gains and fleeing back toward Sith territory. Republic forces pursued, unwilling to let the invaders escape unpunished. What had begun as a Sith war of conquest had become a desperate fight for survival. When Sato's damaged fleet limped back into Sith space, they faced a shock that added catastrophe to defeat.
Ludo Kresh had survived.
The conservative Sith Lord, his flagship destroyed but himself very much alive, had spent the weeks of Sato's absence gathering his supporters and seizing control of the Sith homeworlds. As Sato's battered ships arrived in orbit around Korriban, they were met by Kresh's fleet, fresh and ready for battle. The two Sith factions turned their weapons on each other even as Republic forces closed in behind them. Civil war erupted at the worst possible moment. Ships already damaged from fighting the Republic now faced fire from their fellow Sith. The Valley of the Dark Lords on Korriban's surface became a battlefield as ground forces loyal to each leader clashed among the ancient tombs. In the chaos of the orbital battle, Naga Sato managed to destroy Kresh's flagship. This time, the conservative Sith Lord truly died, his ship blown apart by a concentrated bombardment. But Sato's victory was meaningless. Before he could consolidate his position, Republic warships arrived in the system. The Jedi had tracked the Sith retreat and brought the full might of the Republic military to strike at the heart of the Sith Empire. Hundreds of Republic vessels emerged from hyperspace, surrounding the remnants of Sato's fleet and the forces loyal to the dead Kresh. Caught between the pursuing Republic and the fragmented remains of his own forces, Sato made a desperate gamble. He ordered his flagship to the nearby Denarii binary star system. There, using forbidden Sith techniques that drew on the dark side at a cosmic scale,
Sado caused one of the system's stars to go supernova.
The resulting explosion was cataclysmic. The supernova wiped out a significant portion of the pursuing Republic fleet, buying Sado precious time. In the chaos and confusion, with surviving ships scattered and communications disrupted, Sado escaped, with just a handful of his most loyal Massassi warriors, members of a fierce subspecies that had been genetically altered by Sith alchemy. Naga Sado fled to the remote jungle moon of Yavin 4. There, hidden in the dense forests, he went into exile. The once mighty Dark Lord of the Sith was reduced to a refugee. He built temples in the jungle, conducted dark side experiments, and preserved what Sith knowledge he could. But he knew his chance for conquest had passed. The dream of crushing the Republic and claiming the galaxy for the Sith Empire had died with the failed invasion. Back in Sith space, the Republic showed no mercy. They had been brought to the brink of destruction by the Sith invasion. Worlds had been devastated, millions had died. The Republic was determined to ensure the Sith could never threaten them again. Republic fleets systematically attacked every Sith stronghold they could find. Korriban, Zeost, and other core worlds of the Empire faced orbital bombardments. The magnificent temples and tombs that the Sith had built over a millennium were reduced to rubble or left as empty monuments in the desert. The native Sith species, already diminished by centuries of interbreeding with human bloodlines, were decimated in the Republic assault. Survivors scattered to remote worlds or went into hiding in the deep deserts of Korriban. The proud civilization that had welcomed the Dark Jedi as gods 1,000 years earlier was essentially destroyed. The Jedi were determined to eliminate every trace of the Sith threat. They hunted down surviving Sith lords, destroyed or sealed away Sith artifacts and holocrons, and tried to purge Sith knowledge from the galaxy. Libraries were burned. Temples were collapsed. Anything connected to the dark side teachings of the Sith was targeted for destruction. By the time the Republic forces withdrew, the Sith Empire that had flourished for a millennium was no more. The year 5000 before the Battle of Yavin marked the end of the first great Sith civilization. Historical records from this period often referred to the complete extinction of the Sith Order, but the dark side is not so easily extinguished. Unknown to the Republic or the Jedi, one Sith Lord had neither joined Sado's invasion nor fallen in the subsequent Republic assault.
His name was Vitiate, and he had been watching events unfold from his own stronghold, making careful plans for the Empire's survival.
During the chaos of the Great Hyperspace War, while other Sith Lords were dying in battle or being hunted by the Jedi, Vitiate sent out a secret call.
He contacted surviving Sith Lords, promising them a way to escape the Republic hunters and rebuild their strength far from Jedi oversight.
Hundreds of Sith Lords answered his summons, gathering on the planet Nathema. Vitiate told them he would perform a ritual to save them all, to grant them power beyond imagining that would allow the Sith to rise again. It was a lie more terrible than anything Naga Sado had ever conceived. Once the Sith Lords were assembled, Vitiate enacted his ritual. He linked all the gathered Sith in a massive dark side network, drawing on their combined force presence. Then, in an act of unspeakable evil, he drained their life essence completely. Every living being on Nathema died in that moment. Not just the Sith Lords Vitiate had lured there, but every plant, every animal, every microorganism. The entire planet was stripped of life in a single catastrophic instant. The ritual accomplished two horrifying objectives. First, it granted Vitiate extraordinary power and virtual immortality, sustaining his life force for centuries beyond any normal lifespan. Second, It severed Nathema's connection to the Force itself, turning the entire world into a void that Force sensitives would instinctively avoid, hiding evidence of VT8's crime from any Jedi who might come searching. With his newfound dark power, VT8 gathered the few surviving Sith who had not been part of his ritual. Around 4,900 years before the Battle of Yavin, he led this remnant into the unknown regions, far beyond any territory the Republic controlled or even knew about. There they discovered Dromund Kaas, a world once conquered by the ancient Sith Lord Tulak Horde. The planet was shrouded in constant electrical storms, a manifestation of dark side energy that had accumulated over centuries. It was the perfect place to rebuild in secret. VT8 proclaimed himself the Sith Emperor and promised his followers that one day they would return to crush the Republic. Unlike the old empire with its constant power struggles and succession crises, VT8 established himself as an undisputed and seemingly eternal ruler. His demonstration of power on Nathema had convinced every Sith that challenging him would be suicide. For the next 1,500 years, this hidden Sith empire developed in absolute isolation from the rest of the galaxy. They built cities that rivaled anything in the Republic. They established academies to train new generations in the dark side. They advanced their technology and military capabilities, and all the while, the galaxy at large believed the Sith were extinct, destroyed in the Great Hyperspace War. The Jedi, satisfied that they had eliminated the Sith threat, eventually forgot the lessons they had learned fighting Sadow's invasion. The Republic grew complacent, expanding and prospering without any knowledge of the danger growing in the darkness beyond their borders. Meanwhile, on Yavin 4, Nagasado's legacy also endured.
Though the Dark Lord eventually died, the temples he built and the dark side energy he infused into the jungle moon,
this corrupting presence would wait dormant for thousands of years, ready to influence future generations who discovered its secrets.
The collapse of the first Sith Empire was not the end of the Sith legacy.
It was merely the conclusion of one chapter in a much longer story. The dark side would find new vessels for its power, new ambitions to feed upon, and new opportunities to challenge the light. 4 centuries after the Great Hyperspace War, the galaxy believed it had moved past the threat of the Sith. The Republic had expanded further than ever. The Jedi Order had grown in numbers and influence. Peace and prosperity seemed assured. That's when a Jedi Knight named Freeden Nad discovered that the Sith legacy was far from dead. Freeden Nad was exceptional even among Jedi. Born with extraordinary Force sensitivity, he was taken to the Jedi Temple on Ossus as a young child. His instructors quickly recognized his potential. He grasped Force techniques with remarkable speed. His lightsaber skills surpassed those of his peers. By all accounts, he seemed destined for greatness. But Nad possessed a flaw that would prove fatal to his Jedi career: an overwhelming sense of entitlement. He believed his obvious talents meant he deserved recognition and advancement faster than the traditional Jedi path allowed. When the Jedi Masters passed him over for promotion to Jedi Knight, telling him he needed more time to mature and develop wisdom to match his power, Nad felt betrayed.
His master, Jedi Master Mata Tremaine, tried to guide him through this disappointment.
She told Nad that the Masters were testing him, that true wisdom came from understanding why he wasn't ready, rather than demanding advancement. But Nad, consumed by anger and wounded pride, refused to listen. In a moment that would reshape galactic history, Freeden Nad challenged Master Tremaine to a duel. He ignited his lightsaber and attacked, channeling his rage and frustration into his strikes. Too late, he realized his master wasn't fighting back with full intensity. that she was giving him one final lesson in the consequences of giving in to anger.
But by then, Nad couldn't stop himself. His blade found its mark. Master Tremaine fell, struck down by her own student. Nad stood over his master's body, initially overcome with grief and horror at what he had done. But then a different emotion took hold: defiance. He decided the Jedi had brought this on themselves with their gains and tests. If they wouldn't teach him everything he wanted to learn, he would find teachers who would. He fled Ossus, stealing a ship and setting course for the regions of space where ancient records mention the Sith Empire. If the dark Jedi who had been exiled 1,000 years earlier had found power in their banishment, Nad would do the same. His search led him first to Ashas Ri, where he discovered the holocron of King Adus, an ancient Sith king. This Sith artifact recognized Nad's potential and began teaching him forbidden techniques the Jedi would never have shared. But the holocron's knowledge was incomplete, coming from an era before the Dark Jedi had even joined with the Sith species. Nad continued his search, following clues and Force visions, until he reached Yavin 4. There, in temples overgrown by jungle vegetation, he encountered the spirit of Naga Sado. The ancient Dark Lord had preserved his consciousness beyond death, his spirit lingering in the dark side-saturated temples he had built. For 4 centuries, Sado had waited in isolation, his grand ambitions reduced to bitter memories. The arrival of this Force-sensitive wanderer represented the first real contact Sado had experienced since fleeing the Republic. Sado saw in Nad an opportunity. Perhaps through this young man the Sith legacy could continue. The Dark Lord offered to complete Nad's training in the ways of the Sith, to teach him powers beyond anything the Jedi knew. Nad eagerly accepted. For months or perhaps years he studied under Sado's ghostly tutelage, learning Sith alchemy, mastering dark side techniques, and absorbing the philosophy that had driven the Sith Empire. He grew immensely powerful, far beyond what his Jedi training alone would have allowed. But Nad was ambitious and impatient. When he felt he had learned everything Sado could teach, he made a characteristically Sith decision. Rather than continuing to serve as an apprentice, he would claim the title of Dark Lord for himself. Freedon Nad killed his teacher. Using techniques Sado himself had taught him, Nad destroyed the ancient Sith Lord's spirit, claiming dominance over him and declaring himself the new Dark Lord of the Sith. With Sado's knowledge now his own, Nad left Yavin 4, gathering Sith artifacts and searching for a world to conquer.
He discovered Onderon, a planet in the Inner Rim with a unique and troubled history.
Onderon's human colonists had built a massive walled city called Zizis to protect themselves from the dangerous beasts that inhabited the planet's jungles. The city was ruled by a monarchy, maintaining an uneasy balance between civilization and the wilderness beyond their walls. Freedon Nad arrived on Onderon and used his Sith powers to overwhelm the existing government. His mastery of the Force and his willingness to use it without restraint made him seem invincible to the relatively primitive Onderonians. He declared himself king of Onderon, establishing what would become the House of Nad. Nad's reign brought great changes to Onderon. He implemented harsh laws, exiling criminals and political opponents beyond the city walls to face the savage beasts in the jungle. He expected these exiles to die, but many proved remarkably resilient. They learned to tame the creatures, becoming the beast riders who would plague Onderon for generations. This sparked conflicts that would last for centuries, but Nad didn't live to see their full consequences. After decades of rule, the Dark Lord died, his body laid to rest in an elaborate tomb in Aziz. But like Sador before him,
Nad had learned techniques to preserve his consciousness beyond physical death. For 6 centuries, Nad's spirit influenced Onderon from beyond the grave. His descendants continued to rule, many of them dabbling in the dark side teachings he had left behind. The spirit guided and corrupted those who sought his power, ensuring the Sith legacy would continue even though the Republic believed the Sith extinct. Around 4,000 years before the Battle of Yavin, Nad's influence reached its peak. Queen Aminoa, a descendant of Nad's bloodline, drew heavily on dark-side power to maintain her rule. When the Jedi were called to Onderon to help end the conflicts between Izzies and the Beast Riders, they discovered Nad's tomb and the ongoing corruption it represented. Jedi Master Arkar Jeth confronted Queen Aminoa in Nad's tomb. When she called upon the Dark Lord's power for assistance, Nad made a cold calculation. Aminoa was losing, and supporting her would only expose his influence to the Jedi. He withdrew his power, letting her die. The Jedi believed they had ended Nad's influence by moving his remains to a new tomb on Onderon's moon, Exun. They sealed this tomb with Mandalorian iron, one of the strongest materials in the galaxy, confident it would contain any lingering dark side presence. But Freedon Nad's spirit was far from defeated. Though trapped in the new tomb, he could still manifest if Sith artifacts were activated nearby. He waited patiently for the next seeker of forbidden knowledge, the next ambitious soul who would be drawn to his power. That soul belonged to a Jedi Knight named Exar Kun. Around 4,000 years before the Battle of Yavin, Exar Kun was considered one of the most promising students at the Jedi Academy. Trained under the wise Master Vodo Siask Bas on Dantooine, Kun demonstrated exceptional talent with both the Force and lightsaber combat. His charisma made him a natural leader among his fellow students. But Kun shared Freedon Nad's fatal flaw, an insatiable hunger for knowledge combined with dangerous arrogance.
He believed he could study the dark side without being corrupted by it, that his strength of will would allow him to learn forbidden techniques while remaining true to the light.
Master Vodo Siask Bas recognized the danger in his students' thinking and tried to guide Kun away from this perilous path. But Kun, like Nad before him, resented what he saw as the Jedi Council's attempt to limit his potential. He began secretly studying forbidden holocrons, learning about the history of the Sith, and growing convinced that the ancient dark side practices held power the Jedi refused to acknowledge. Kun's research eventually led him to information about Freedon Nad and his tomb on Exun.
Despite his master's warnings, Kun left the Jedi Academy and traveled to Onderon, determined to unlock the secrets Nad had left behind.
On Exun, Kun found Nad's tomb sealed as the Jedi had left it. Using the Force, he cut through the Mandalorian iron, revealing the chamber within. Sith artifacts filled the tomb, objects infused with dark side energy.
And there, waiting for him, was Nad's spirit.
The ancient Dark Lord recognized Kun's potential immediately. Here was a vessel powerful enough to potentially restore the Sith to prominence. Nad began subtly influencing Kun, encouraging him to delve deeper into Sith knowledge, urging him toward greater and greater use of the dark side. Nad's spirit directed Kun to Korriban, the ancient Sith homeworld. There, among the ruins of the great Sith temples, other dead Sith lords joined Nad in corrupting the young Jedi. They engineered a cave-in that trapped Kun beneath tons of rock, offering him a choice: embrace the dark side completely and save himself, or maintain his Jedi principles and die. Kun chose to live. He called on his rage and fear, channeling the dark side to escape the cave-in. The power he felt was intoxicating, far beyond anything his Jedi training had provided. The ancient Sith spirits celebrated, knowing they had claimed another soul for darkness. But Nad's plan didn't end there. He directed Kun to Yavin 4, the jungle moon where Naga Sado had once hidden. There, Nad promised, Kun would find even greater power and knowledge. On Yavin 4, Kun encountered the Misasi, descendants of the warriors Sado had brought with him centuries earlier. They attacked the intruder, but Kun's powers allowed him to defeat them. Rather than simply killing the Misasi, Kun used Sith alchemy to alter them, making them his servants and using dark side rituals to drain power from some to enhance his own abilities. Throughout this journey, Frieden Nad's spirit continued to guide Kun, teaching him more Sith techniques and drawing him further into darkness. But Nad made a critical mistake. He believed Kun would remain his apprentice, a tool for Nad to use in an attempt to resurrect himself in a new body.
Exar Kun had different plans.
Like Nad had done with Naga Sado, Kun turned on his master. Using Sith amulets he had collected, particularly one that had belonged to the ancient Dark Lord Marka Ragnos, Kun destroyed Frieden Nad's spirit once and for all. Standing in the temples of Yavin 4, surrounded by his enslaved Misasi servants, Exar Kun declared himself the new Dark Lord of the Sith. He was no longer a fallen Jedi or a student of the dark side. He was a Sith Lord, heir to a tradition stretching back thousands of years. Around this same time, another Jedi was fallen to the dark side through a different path. Ulic Keldroma, a noble and brave Jedi Knight, had attempted to infiltrate a dark side cult called the Kroth by posing as someone sympathetic to their cause. But during his time among them, he was poisoned with dark side corrupted materials and tortured, gradually turning him from infiltrator to genuine convert. When Exar Kun learned of another powerful dark side user, he sought out Keldroma. The two met on the Empress Teta system, their encounter beginning with a violent duel as each sought to prove their dominance. Their battle was interrupted by a ghostly apparition. The spirit of Marka Ragnos, the ancient Sith Emperor, manifested before them. Just as he had appeared at his own funeral to stop Naga Sado and Ludo Kresh from destroying each other, Ragnos now intervened to prevent these two dark-siders from killing each other before they could fulfill their potential. Ragnos declared both Kun and Keldroma worthy of the title Sith Lord. More than that, he proclaimed Exar Kun as the new Dark Lord of the Sith, with Ulic Keldroma as his apprentice. Together, Ragnos promised they would bring about a new golden age for the Sith. Thus began the Great Sith War. Exar Kun and Ulic Keldroma wasted no time gathering forces for their campaign. The Kraith cult provided a ready-made army of dark side followers. Kun traveled to Ossus, the repository of Jedi knowledge, where he used a Sith holocron to corrupt some of the brightest young Jedi students. He convinced them that the path to true power lay through the dark side, turning them against their own masters. Meanwhile, Keldroma secured an alliance with the Mandalorian clans, warrior cultures that had been seeking new conflicts after recovering from past defeats.
The Mandalorians recognized Keldroma as a worthy warlord and pledged their considerable military might to the Sith cause.
The war began with a coordinated strike against the Republic. Kun's corrupted Jedi students turned on their masters in a devastating purge that killed dozens of experienced Jedi across multiple worlds. The sudden loss of so many teachers and leaders left the Order reeling, struggling to organize an effective response. Keldroma led Sith and Mandalorian forces in direct assaults on Republic strongholds. Worlds that had known peace for generations suddenly faced invasion by ruthless warriors who showed no mercy. The scale of the conflict quickly eclipsed anything seen since the Great Hyperspace War. Exar Kun himself attacked Ossus, seeking to claim the Jedi's accumulated knowledge and destroy what he couldn't take. Master Odin Ur, an ancient Jedi who had served the Order for centuries, confronted Kun in the Great Library. The Dark Lord struck him down, murdering one of the Order's greatest sages, and made off with valuable Sith holocrons and texts. Before withdrawing from Ossus, Kun triggered a catastrophic event. Using Sith sorcery, he initiated a chain reaction in the nearby Cron cluster, causing multiple stars to go supernova. The resulting radiation would devastate Ossus, destroying the Great Library and forcing the Jedi to evacuate their most sacred site. The Sith seemed unstoppable. They had surprise, superior ruthlessness, and the advantage of two brilliant leaders coordinating their efforts. Republic forces fell back across multiple fronts. The Jedi Order, still recovering from the purge of their masters, struggled to mount an effective defense. But the seeds of the Sith's defeat were already germinating, growing from the same source that had destroyed previous Sith empires: internal betrayal and the corrupting nature of the dark side itself. Ulic quelled Droma's fall to the dark side, while complete, left scars on his conscience that his commitment to the Sith couldn't entirely erase. During a battle with his own brother Kay Keldroma, Ulic gave in fully to his rage and struck Kay down, killing him. The moment his brother fell, something broke inside Ulic. The dark side influence that had been clouding his judgment cracked. He stood over Kay's body, suddenly seeing clearly what he had become and what he had done. Jedi Master Nomi Soonrider, who had loved Ulic before his fall, took this moment to act. Using a rare and devastating Force ability, she severed Keldroma's connection to the Force itself. The power that had defined his entire life, both as Jedi and Sith, was torn away from him.
Ulic Keldroma, now blind to the Force and overcome with grief for his brother, realized the terrible mistake he had made.
Broken and repentant, he offered to help the Jedi stop Exar Kun. He revealed the location of Kun's base on Yavin 4, giving the Republic and Jedi the intelligence they needed to strike at the Dark Lord directly. When Exar Kun learned of his apprentice's betrayal, he wasn't surprised. The dark side always turned followers against their masters eventually. What concerned him more was the impending attack on his stronghold. A massive Republic fleet was gathering, preparing to assault Yavin 4 with overwhelming force. Kun recognized he couldn't win this battle conventionally. The Republic had finally marshaled its full military strength. Even his mastery of the dark side couldn't overcome such numbers. He needed to survive, to preserve his power for a future opportunity. In the temples of Yavin 4, surrounded by his enslaved Massassi servants, Exar Kun enacted a ritual of terrifying ambition. He would drain the life energy of every Massassi on the moon, thousands of living beings, and use that vast reservoir of power to separate his spirit from his body. He would become like Freeden Nad and the other ancient Sith lords before him, a consciousness preserved beyond death.
The Massassi, loyal to the end through Sith alchemy and dark side corruption, willingly sacrificed themselves.
Their life force flowed into Kun, and he used it to anchor his spirit to the temples he had built. His physical body died, but his consciousness remained, bound to Yavin 4 itself. When the Republic fleet arrived and bombarded the temples, they destroyed much of the physical infrastructure, but couldn't reach Kun's spirit. The surviving Jedi searched the ruins, believing they had killed the Dark Lord. They found no body, no clear evidence of his fate, but they assumed their assault had been successful. Exar Kun's spirit remained dormant in the temples, too weak to manifest or influence the physical world. He would wait there, trapped and nearly powerless, for almost 4,000 years. the Rebel Alliance would unknowingly establish their base in his temples. Luke Skywalker would later build his Jedi Academy on the same site, and only then would Kuhn's spirit gain enough strength to briefly threaten a new generation. But that was far in the future. For now, with Ulic Qel-Droma stripped of his power and Exar Kun apparently destroyed, the Great Sith War ended. The Republic had won, though at tremendous cost. Ossus was devastated. Dozens of Jedi Masters were dead. Countless worlds bore the scars of Sith attacks. The Jedi Order began a period of rebuilding and reflection. They had faced the Sith twice in recent history, and twice they had barely survived. The Council knew they needed to be better prepared for future dark side threats. What they didn't know was that the greatest Sith threat was still growing in power, hidden in the unknown regions where the ancient Sith Emperor Vitiate continued building his empire.
2 decades after the Great Sith War, the galaxy had largely recovered.
The Republic was expanding again. The Jedi Order had rebuilt its numbers and influence. Peace seemed secure. That's when the Mandalorians returned to challenge both. The Mandalorian people had a long and complex history in the galaxy. They were not a single species, but a culture, a way of life centered on martial prowess, personal honor, and the pursuit of worthy challenges. Anyone who followed the Mandalorian code and proved themselves in combat could be adopted into the culture regardless of their species of origin. The Mandalorians traced their origins to the warrior species called the Tong, who had established the planet Mandalore as their homeworld thousands of years earlier. They had participated in various conflicts over the centuries, most recently allying with Ulic Qel-Droma during the Great Sith War. After that conflict ended, many had expected the Mandalorians to fade into obscurity. Instead, they united under a new leader. Mandalore the Ultimate, a visionary warrior, pioneered what became known as the Neo-Crusader movement. This new philosophy emphasized unity and purpose over the traditional Mandalorian focus on individual clan loyalties. Mandalore the Ultimate sought to create the most powerful military force in the galaxy, and to achieve this, he needed to test his warriors against the strongest opponents available. That meant challenging the Republic and its Jedi protectors. The Mandalorian Wars began around 3,970, 6 years before the Battle of Yavin, with relatively small-scale raids on Outer Rim worlds. The Mandalorians attacked unaligned systems first, conquering and absorbing them into their growing empire. These early victories allowed them to recruit new warriors and expand their forces. The Jedi Council, observing these events, chose not to intervene. They remembered the Great Sith War and the toll it had taken on the Order. They believed the Republic military could handle the Mandalorian threat without Jedi assistance. More philosophically, they felt the Jedi should not rush into every conflict, but should act only when the Force clearly guided them to do so. This decision proved controversial among younger Jedi. They watched as world after world fell to Mandalorian conquest. They saw the suffering of civilian populations caught in the Mandalorians' path, and they grew increasingly frustrated with the Council's inaction. Among these frustrated young Jedi were 2 close friends, Revan and Alec, who would later take the name Malak. Both were exceptionally talented Force users and natural leaders. Revan, in particular, possessed a brilliant strategic mind and a charisma that inspired others to follow him. Around 3,965 years before the Battle of Yavin, the Mandalorians escalated their campaign dramatically. They broke through Republic defensive lines and besieged Taris, a major urban world. This direct attack on a significant Republic planet forced the Senate to mobilize fully, But by then, the Mandalorians had momentum on their side. The war entered a new phase known as the Onslaught, as Mandalorian forces invaded Republic space through 3 separate corridors. World after world fell before their advance. The Republic military, long at peace and unprepared for such a determined foe, struggled to mount effective resistance. Watching this catastrophe unfold, Revan and Malak made their decision. They would defy the Jedi Council and lead whoever would follow them to war. They called themselves the Revanchists, and they appealed directly to their fellow Jedi to join the fight. Many answered the call. Thousands of Jedi, particularly younger knights and Padawans who hadn't yet been shaped by decades of council teaching, rallied to Revan's banner. They saw it as their duty to defend the innocent, to use their powers to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. The council was furious at this defiance, but powerless to stop it. The revanchists departed for the war, and the Jedi Order faced its largest schism since the Dark Jedi Rebellion thousands of years earlier. Revan's involvement changed the war immediately. His tactical genius proved to be exactly what the Republic needed. He studied Mandalorian tactics, identified their weaknesses, and developed strategies to counter them. More importantly, his ability to inspire troops turned defeats into victories through sheer force of morale. One particularly significant moment came during a battle on the world of Cathar. The Mandalorians, seeking to demoralize their opponents, perpetrated a near genocide of the Cathar species, a feline humanoid race. Millions died in this brutal massacre. One Mandalorian warrior, disgusted by this atrocity, spoke out against it and was executed alongside the Cathar for his defiance. Revan recovered this warrior's mask from the battlefield. He wore it from that day forward, both as a memorial to the Mandalorian who had chosen honor over obedience, and as a symbol of his vow to stop the slaughter. The image of Revan in that distinctive mask became legendary, inspiring hope among Republic forces and striking fear into Mandalorian warriors. Under Revan's leadership, the Republic began pushing back the Mandalorian advance. Slowly, methodically, Revan reclaimed lost territory and forced the Mandalorians onto the defensive. His reputation grew until Supreme Chancellor Tol Kressa appointed him Supreme Commander of the Republic military around 3960, 2 years before the Battle of Yavin.
With this authority, Revan coordinated Republic forces across all theaters of the war.
His friend Malak served as his primary lieutenant, commanding fleets and leading ground assaults. Together they became the heroes of the Republic, celebrated throughout civilized space. But Revan recognized that simply defeating the Mandalorians in battle wouldn't be enough. They needed to be broken as a military power, prevented from ever threatening the galaxy again. To achieve this, Revan forced a final confrontation at a place of great dark side significance, Malachor V. Malachor V was a world touched by ancient Sith influence, where a terrible battle had occurred thousands of years earlier. The planet radiated dark side energy, making it a place of power and horror. Revan chose it deliberately, though his reasons for doing so remained mysterious even to his closest allies. The Battle of Malachor V in 3,960 years before the Battle of Yavin would be the decisive engagement of the Mandalorian Wars. Massive fleets from both sides converged on the planet, each commander knowing this battle would determine the war's outcome. Revan personally challenged Mandalore the Ultimate to single combat, a duel to determine which warrior tradition deserved to claim supremacy. The Mandalorian leader accepted, and the two fought while their fleets clashed in orbit above them. Revan won. His superior connection to the Force and his tactical brilliance allowed him to overcome Mandalore the Ultimate's raw skill and strength. When the Mandalorian leader fell, Revan took an action that would have lasting consequences. He claimed Mandalore's mask,
the symbol of leadership among the Mandalorian clans, and hid it away where no one could find it. Without their Mandalore to lead them, the Mandalorian clans would be leaderless, scattered, unable to unite for conquest.
Revan had decapitated their command structure in a single stroke.
But the battle wasn't over. One of Revan's generals, Mitra Surik, activated a superweapon that had been secretly constructed on Malachor V. This mass shadow generator created a gravitational anomaly of devastating power. Ships from both the Mandalorian and Republic fleets were pulled from orbit, crushed by impossible gravity. The surface of Malachor V itself was torn apart. Thousands died in moments, Republic and Mandalorian alike. The mass shadow generator achieved its purpose, destroying the Mandalorian fleet and ensuring their defeat. But the cost in lives, including Republic lives, was horrific. General Surik was traumatized by the experience. The deaths of so many beings created a wound in the Force that severed her connection to it. She would later become known as the Jedi Exile, cut off from the Force that had defined her entire life. The Mandalorian Wars were over. The Republic had won. Revan and Malak were celebrated as the saviors of civilization. But the Jedi Council, which had opposed the war from the beginning, now demanded that Revan and all the Jedi who had followed him return to face judgment for their defiance. General Surik obeyed the summons. She traveled to the Jedi Council, confessed her role in activating the mass shadow generator, and accepted exile from the Jedi Order as punishment for her actions. Revan and Malak did not return. Instead, they took the remainder of their most loyal forces and departed for the unknown regions, claiming they needed to pursue the last remnants of the Mandalorian forces. The Council, already dealing with Surik's case and the larger question of what to do with the thousands of Jedi who had joined the revanchists, could do little to stop them. What the Council didn't know was that Revan had discovered something during the war, a mystery that had been troubling him for months. The Mandalorian attack on the Republic hadn't been a random act of aggression. Someone had manipulated Mandalore the Ultimate, pushing the Mandalorians toward war for purposes that had nothing to do with honor or conquest. Revan believed this manipulator was hidden somewhere in the unknown regions. He convinced Malak that they needed to find this hidden enemy and eliminate them before they could threaten the Republic again. Together, they led their small fleet into the darkness beyond charted space. They searched for months, exploring ancient ruins and following fragmentary clues. Their journey eventually led them to a world called Dromund Kaas, the capital of the hidden Sith Empire that had been growing in strength for over 1,000 years. There, in the dark halls of the Sith Emperor's citadel, Revan and Malak came face to face with Vidiate himself. They had come to confront and defeat the ancient Sith who had manipulated the Mandalorians into war. They failed. The Sith Emperor's power exceeded anything Revan or Malak could have imagined. Vitiate had been alive for well over 1,000 years, sustained by the dark ritual that had drained all life from Nathema. His mastery of the Force was absolute, honed over centuries of study and experimentation. Before Revan and Malak could even attack, the Emperor reached into their minds with the Force. He dominated their thoughts, crushed their resistance, and twisted their personalities to serve his purposes. The two Jedi heroes were turned into Sith Lords through sheer mental domination, their fall to the dark side completed in moments. The Emperor had plans for these new servants. He ordered them to find and activate an ancient superweapon called the Star Forge, a space station built by the extinct Rakata species. This factory could produce ships and weapons at an impossible rate, drawing power directly from nearby stars. With the Star Forge, the Emperor believed he could build an armada large enough to crush the Republic. He sent the newly christened Darth Revan and Darth Malak back to Republic space as advance agents for his eventual invasion.
They were to find the Star Forge, use it to build a fleet, and begin weakening the Republic in preparation for the Emperor's main assault. Publicly, the Emperor announced to his Sith subjects that Revan and Malak had been Republic spies and had been captured and executed. In truth, they were very much alive, carrying out his commands while believing themselves to be acting of their own free will. Darth Revan and Darth Malak spent the next year searching for the Star Forge. They traveled to ancient Rakata ruins, gathering pieces of a star map that would reveal the weapon's location. During this time, they studied Sith teachings, immersing themselves further in dark side philosophy. And somewhere in this process, something changed. Perhaps Revan's brilliant mind began to break free of the Emperor's conditioning. Perhaps his natural strategic thinking led him to realize that serving the Emperor would ultimately doom both the Republic and the Sith to destruction in a pointless war. Whatever the reason, Revan and Malak began to see themselves not as the Emperor's servants, but as independent Sith Lords with their own agenda. When they finally located the Star Forge, they made a fateful decision. They would break free of the Emperor's mental control and claim the superweapon for themselves. They would build their own Sith empire, one strong enough to stand against both the Republic and the Emperor's hidden forces. Thus began the Jedi Civil War. Around 3,959 years before the Battle of Yavin, 1 year after the Mandalorian Wars ended, a massive Sith fleet emerged from the unknown regions. At its head stood Darth Revan, the hero who had saved the Republic, now transformed into its greatest enemy. Malak served as his Sith apprentice, commanding portions of the fleet and leading ground assaults. The Republic was unprepared for this new threat. They had just finished recovering from the Mandalorian Wars. Their military was exhausted, their resources depleted, and now they faced an enemy led by the greatest tactical mind of the age, someone who knew all the Republic's strengths and weaknesses because he had recently commanded their entire military. Worse, many of the Jedi who had followed Revan during the Mandalorian Wars now followed him into the dark side. These fallen Jedi became the core of Revan's new Sith Empire, using their knowledge of Jedi tactics and Force abilities to devastating effect against their former brothers and sisters. But Revan's strategy wasn't simply conquest through overwhelming force. His goals were more complex and subtle than they appeared. While his Sith forces attacked Republic worlds and Jedi installations, Revan avoided attacking certain critical infrastructure. He left Coruscant largely untouched. He spared major shipyards and industrial centers that he could have easily destroyed. This strange pattern confused Republic strategists. It seemed almost as if Revan was trying to conquer the Republic intact rather than destroy it completely. Some theorized that he wanted to rule the Republic, not annihilate it. Others believed he was preserving these assets for some future purpose. The truth, which wouldn't be fully understood for years, was that Revan still believed in his original mission. He was strengthening the Republic, forcing it to militarize and unify under a strong central authority. He planned to rule it absolutely, but only so he could prepare it for the real threat, the Sith Emperor's eventual invasion from the unknown regions. Revan believed only a militarized, authoritarian state could resist vitiate. Democracy was too slow, too weak, too fractured. He would forge the Republic into an empire capable of standing against the ancient Sith, even if that meant temporarily becoming the villain. The Jedi Order mobilized to stop their fallen hero. They recognized that only they had the abilities necessary to counter Force-using opponents. The war became as much a conflict between Jedi and Sith as between the Republic and Revan's empire. Enter Bastila Shan, a young Jedi Padawan who possessed a rare gift: battle meditation. This Force ability allowed her to influence the morale and coordination of friendly forces while disrupting enemy unity across entire battlefields. She could turn the tide of massive fleet engagements through the Force alone. Recognizing her value, the Jedi Council assigned Bastila to a strike team tasked with an almost impossible mission: capture or kill Darth Revan himself.
Remove the brilliant strategist leading the Sith, and perhaps the war could be ended quickly.
In 3,957 years before the Battle of Yavin, Bastila and her team infiltrated Revan's flagship.
They fought through Sith defenders, battling their way to the bridge where the Dark Lord commanded his forces.
The Jedi strike team confronted Revan, prepared for a battle that would determine the war's fate. But before they could engage, Darth Malak made his move. The Sith apprentice had grown ambitious. He wanted to claim the position of Dark Lord for himself, to rule the Sith Empire without Revan above him. Seeing both Revan and the Jedi strike team vulnerable on the flagship's bridge, Malak saw an opportunity too perfect to ignore. He ordered the ships under his command to fire on the flagship's bridge. The bombardment was devastating. Turbo-laser blasts tore through shields and hull plating. The flagship's bridge became an inferno. Most of the Jedi strike team died instantly. Revan, caught in the center of the explosion, was critically wounded, his mind and body broken by the assault. Only Bastila survived, shielded by the Force at the crucial moment. She found Revan dying among the wreckage, his life fading. Using her Force healing ability, she saved him from death, stabilizing his critical injuries. But in doing so, she formed a Force bond with him, a connection that would link their minds and fates. Bastila brought the critically injured Revan to the Jedi Enclave on Dantooine. There, the Jedi Council faced a dilemma. They had Darth Revan, the greatest threat to the Republic, unconscious and helpless. Many argued they should execute him immediately. Others suggested imprisonment, though they doubted any prison could hold such a powerful Force user permanently. The Council chose a third option, one that would prove controversial for years to come.
Using the Force, they erased Revan's memories.
They wiped away all knowledge of his time as a Sith Lord, his years as Supreme Commander, even his years as a Jedi. They gave him a new identity, a false past as a simple Republic soldier with latent Force abilities. The Council's plan was to use the Force bond Bastila had formed with Revan to guide him toward unconsciously revealing the location of the Star Forge. With Revan's memories gone but his subconscious knowledge intact, they hoped he might lead them to the superweapon that made the Sith fleet possible. Meanwhile, Darth Malak had claimed the title of Dark Lord and was continuing Revan's war, though without his master's strategic brilliance or subtle purpose. Malak's approach was more straightforward and brutal, seeking to crush the Republic through overwhelming force rather than preserve it for some future purpose. This is where the events of the game Knights of the Old Republic begin, though those events would eventually reveal truths the Council couldn't have anticipated. The redeemed Revan, with his memories erased but his tactical genius and Force sensitivity intact, was retrained as a Jedi. Bastila served as his teacher, using their Force bond to accelerate his training. Together with a diverse group of companions, they sought the star maps that would lead them to the Star Forge. During this journey, Revan slowly began recovering fragments of his past. He experienced dreams and visions that hinted at his true identity. The Force bond with Bastila grew stronger, and romantic feelings developed between them. Though both tried to suppress these emotions, according to Jedi teaching. The companions they gathered on this journey became legendary in their own right. Carthanasi, a Republic pilot who had fought in the Mandalorian Wars, Mission Vow, a young Twi'lek with a tragic past. Zalbar, her Wookiee partner and protector. Canderous Ordo, a Mandalorian warrior seeking redemption. Juhani, a Cathar Jedi struggling with the dark side. Julie Bindo, an elderly Jedi who had left the Order decades earlier. The assassin droid HK-47, whose personality programming made him as humorous as he was deadly. And the astromech droid T-3M4, whose technical skills proved invaluable. Together, aboard their ship, the Ebon Hawk, this unlikely crew traveled across the galaxy, finding star maps on Tatooine, Kashyyyk, Manan, and Korriban. Each world presented unique challenges that tested their skills and their bonds with each other. But disaster struck when Malak's forces ambushed them, capturing the entire crew aboard the Leviathan, Malak's flagship. There, Admiral Saul Karath revealed to Revan the truth about his identity. The Republic soldier he believed himself to be was a lie. He was Darth Revan, Dark Lord of the Sith, architect of the war that was tearing the galaxy apart. Revan faced a choice. He could reclaim his identity as the Dark Lord, return to leading the Sith, and complete his original plan. Or he could reject that dark past and continue as a Jedi, fighting to stop the destruction he had begun. The choice was complicated by Bastila. Malak captured her when they escaped the Leviathan. He tortured her for days, using pain and suffering to break her will. Eventually, she fell to the dark side, becoming Malak's new apprentice. When Revan finally reached the Starforge, having decided to remain with the light side and stop Malak, he found Bastila waiting for him. She had become everything he had rejected, a dark side wielder convinced that power and passion were the true path. Their confrontation was as much philosophical as physical. Bastila argued that Revan should return to the dark side, that together they could rule the galaxy and bring order through strength. Revan countered that the dark side led only to destruction and suffering, that true strength came from resisting its temptations. Revan's arguments, combined with the force bond they shared and the love that had grown between them, finally broke through Bastila's dark side conditioning. She rejected Malak and returned to the light, her redemption complete. This left only the final confrontation, Revan versus Malak. The battle took place in the Starforge's command center, surrounded by terminals that Malak had modified to drain force energy from captured Jedi. The former apprentice had turned on his master, and now the master had returned to exact justice. Malak was powerful, enhanced by the dark side and the Starforge's energy, but Revan was stronger, wiser, and more skilled. The duel raged through the command center, force powers and lightsaber strikes testing both combatants to their limits. In the end, Revan prevailed. Malak fell, his ambitions dying with him. The Dark Lord's last words reflected on the path he had chosen, the waste of his potential, and the tragedy of what he had become.
With Malak defeated, the Republic fleet destroyed the Starforge.
The Sith Empire that Revan and Malak had built collapsed without its leader, its superweapon, and its seemingly infinite supply of ships and soldiers. The Jedi Civil War was over. Revan had saved the Republic twice, first from the Mandalorians and then from the Sith Empire he himself had created. He was honored as a hero, celebrated across the galaxy. But Revan couldn't forget what he had learned during his time as a Sith Lord. He remembered the Sith Emperor, Vitiate, still building his strength in the unknown regions. That ancient threat hadn't disappeared. It was merely waiting for the right moment to strike. Revan married Bastila, defying Jedi tradition in favor of the love they shared.
They settled on Coruscant, trying to build a normal life together.
But the memories of the Emperor haunted Revan. He knew that someday Vitiate would return. And when that happened, the Republic needed to be ready. Within 2 years of the Starforge's destruction, Revan left Bastila behind, though she was pregnant with their child. He couldn't risk exposing her to the dangers he would face. He returned to the unknown regions alone, seeking to stop the Emperor before the ancient Sith could launch his invasion. What happened to Revan in the unknown regions remained a mystery for centuries. But his warning about the Emperor proved prophetic. 300 years after Revan defeated Malak, in 3,681 years before the Battle of Yavin, the Sith Emperor finally made his move. The hidden Sith Empire, built over 1,300 years of preparation, struck at the Republic with devastating force. The Great Galactic War began when Sith warships emerged from the unknown regions, attacking Republic outposts along the Outer Rim. These initial strikes were coordinated and overwhelming, demonstrating that the Empire had been planning this assault for generations. The Republic, having enjoyed 3 centuries of relative peace since the Jedi Civil War, was unprepared for the scope of the threat. Their military had downsized during peacetime. The Jedi Order, while strong, was scattered across the galaxy on various missions. No one anticipated an enemy with the resources and determination of the hidden Sith Empire. The Sith Emperor had spent those 1,300 years building this moment. Spies had infiltrated Republic society, some of them puppets whose true nature remained hidden even from themselves. Diplomatic contacts had secured alliances with various species and governments. The Sith military had grown to match or exceed the Republic's capabilities. The invasion followed a carefully orchestrated plan. The Sith struck at the Outer Rim first, securing a foothold before pushing deeper into Republic space. They avoided direct assaults on the most heavily defended core worlds, instead focusing on cutting supply lines and isolating major systems. World after world fell to the Sith onslaught. The shipyards at Sluis Van were destroyed, crippling the Republic's ability to build new vessels. The Rimma trade route was blockaded, strangling commerce between the Outer Rim and the core. The ancient Sith homeworld of Korriban, abandoned since the Great Hyperspace War, was reclaimed and fortified. The Galactic Senate, faced with this existential threat, struggled to mount an effective response. Different factions argued over strategy. Some worlds refused to commit forces to defend others, choosing to fortify their own systems instead. The democratic process that had served the Republic well during peacetime became a liability in war. The Jedi Order mobilized fully, but even their considerable power wasn't enough to turn the tide. The Sith had learned from past defeats. They brought their own dark side wielders in sufficient numbers to counter the Jedi. Moreover, they employed weapons specifically designed to counter Force users. Among the most dangerous Sith weapons was a group called the Dread Masters. These Sith Lords worked together to project terror through the Force across entire battlefields. Republic crews would suddenly experience overwhelming fear, causing them to flee or make fatal mistakes.
This battle meditation in reverse devastated Republic morale.
For 13 years, the Dread Masters operated with impunity, their location constantly shifting to avoid Republic countermeasures. But eventually, a Republic strike team led by Jedi Knight Jarek Kaiden managed to track them down and capture them. This victory provided a much-needed boost to Republic morale and eliminated one of the Sith's most effective weapons. The war dragged on for 28 years, becoming the longest and most destructive conflict in galactic history. Entire star systems were devastated. Billions died in the fighting. The Republic economy collapsed under the strain of maintaining a war machine large enough to resist the Sith.
By 365, 3 years before the Battle of Yavin, both sides were exhausted. The Sith had conquered roughly half the galaxy, but had failed to achieve the quick victory the Emperor had anticipated. The Republic held the other half, but lacked the resources to push back and reclaim lost territory. It was in this context that the Sith's Dark Council surprised the Galactic Senate with an offer of peace. They proposed a formal treaty that would end hostilities and establish recognized borders between the two governments. The Republic was deeply suspicious of this offer. They remembered how the Sith had operated in the past, the deceptions and betrayals that characterized their culture. But the Senate also recognized they were losing. Without peace, the Republic would eventually collapse from economic exhaustion and military attrition. The Jedi Council urged caution but agreed the Republic couldn't continue fighting indefinitely. Even they, with their force abilities and moral authority, had to acknowledge reality. The war was unwinnable, and peace, however imperfect, offered the only hope for survival. The Sith, meanwhile, prepared a final stroke to ensure the Republic would accept their terms. While peace negotiations were ongoing, the Sith Empire launched a massive assault on Coruscant itself, the Republic capital. Led by Darth Angro, a powerful Sith Lord, the Imperial Armada bypassed Republic defenses through intelligence provided by their deep cover agents. They struck at Coruscant with overwhelming force, catching the planet's defenders completely off guard. The sacking of Coruscant became one of the darkest days in Republic history. Sith forces attacked the Jedi Temple, killing many defenders and stealing precious holocrons and artifacts. They bombarded government buildings, captured key installations, and held the planet under occupation. The message was clear: if the Republic didn't accept the peace terms, the Sith could destroy Coruscant entirely. With their capital under enemy control and their military exhausted, the Republic delegation had no choice. They signed the Treaty of Coruscant, ending the Great Galactic War but ceding vast territories to the Sith Empire. The treaty was humiliating for the Republic. They lost dozens of key systems, trade routes were disrupted, their authority was diminished across half the galaxy. The Jedi Order, devastated by losses during the sacking of Coruscant, withdrew from the capital entirely, establishing a new home on their ancient world of Tython. But the treaty also achieved what both sides claimed to want: peace. The guns fell silent. Soldiers returned home. Commerce slowly began to recover. Except it wasn't really peace. It was what historians would call the Cold War, an uneasy armistice characterized by espionage, proxy conflicts, and constant preparation for the inevitable resumption of hostilities. The Sith Empire and the Galactic Republic stood facing each other across a heavily militarized border, each watching for any sign of weakness from the other. Both sides rebuilt their fleets, trained new soldiers, and sought advantages through intelligence and diplomacy. This Cold War would continue for over a decade, with numerous incidents threatening to reignite full-scale conflict. But that's a story for another time, events that fall beyond the scope of our journey through the Old Republic's history. What we've witnessed tonight is a chronicle of the galaxy's formative eras, when the Republic was young and the Sith were first discovering their power. We've seen the cycle repeat again and again, the Sith rising to challenge the Republic, achieving early victories through superior ruthlessness and dark side powers, then falling to internal betrayals and the resilience of those who fought for the light. From the exile of the Dark Jedi 7,000 years before the Battle of Yavin to the Treaty of Coruscant 3,653 years before that same battle, the Old Republic experienced wars, reforms, golden ages, and near collapses. Through it all, the fundamental conflict remained the same: light versus darkness, peace versus passion, wisdom
versus power.
The Jedi and Sith would continue their eternal struggle for thousands of years after the events we've discussed tonight.
The Republic would endure, transform into an empire, and eventually be reborn again. But the patterns established in the old Republic era would echo through all of galactic history. As you drift off to sleep, let your mind wander through these ancient conflicts. Imagine the hyperspace routes being mapped for the first time, connecting isolated worlds into a galactic civilization. Picture the Jedi Temple on Ossus, filled with knowledge accumulated over millennia. Envision the massive Sith tombs on Korriban, monuments to dark side ambition. See Revan wearing the Mandalorian mask, rallying Republic forces against impossible odds. Watch Exar Kun's fall from promising Jedi student to Dark Lord of the Sith. Witness the Starforge producing ships at an impossible rate, fueling a war that could have destroyed civilization itself. These stories aren't just history. They're the foundation of everything that would come later, the seeds from which the galaxy we know grew. The conflicts between Jedi and Sith in the Old Republic established patterns that would repeat across thousands of years, influencing events all the way to the rise and fall of Darth Vader. Rest now, knowing that in a galaxy far, far away, these ancient battles shaped the destiny of trillions of lives yet to come. If you enjoyed this journey through the Old Republic and want to explore more Star Wars lore, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. There are countless more stories waiting to be told, from the rise of the Empire to the Clone Wars to the adventures of individual Sith Lords and Jedi Masters throughout history. May the Force be with you, and may your dreams carry you to distant stars and forgotten eras. Good night.